and welcome to another episode of Matt Talks Back. Episode number 8, technically, number 2 of the relaunch, and we're going to be doing many more, as the goal is to be doing at least 2 a month over the next few months here, and we'd like to up that to 1 a week when we get there eventually, once I get my systems up and running properly. On the show today with us is City Councilor Tim Bennett. Tim, thank you so much for sitting down with us in the hot seat today.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you so much for having me, and congrats on the relaunch. I know when we were talking, kind of leading into the podcast, really kind of identifying I think the gap in local coverage, especially around municipal politics, that you're hoping to fill. And I know you spoke about some pretty amazing former Prince George journalists who really dove into local politics, and I think they're sorely missed. And I know you're looking uh, to help try to fill that gap in terms of an approach, but a hard hitting approach to local politicians. So, just congratulations on the relaunch, and I'm glad to get in and have a chance to chat with you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that's you pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I think right now that our conversations are not long enough to get to any type of understanding in the current platforms that we have out there, and it doesn't seem like anybody's working towards that at all. That's not the goal in anybody's mind. So I think podcasts are a great way to do that. It's a platform where we can talk long form about things. And look, I'm no expert on any of these things at the end of the day. I'm just a resident, like most of the people are out there. And I think we can come to some understanding with just some very simple questions and diving into some things and being truthful and honest. So one thing that I tell everybody right off the top of the show, any documents that we look at here on the show will be put into the show notes. I don't think we're going to get into any today, but just in case they come up, it will be in the show notes for full transparency. We also do not do any cuts here unless it's, if we have a technical issue or something like that, I might cut something out of the show. But there's no cuts. Whatever is said here is what goes through as well. So let's get into it. Now, Tim, I've known you for quite a while. Knew you way back in the radio days, back when I was eating all your hot dogs at charity events, doing on locations, all the way through your time with the school board and now into city council as well. So a very long journey in Prince George's help and public sector. Why is this the path for you? How did you get into it, and why is this so important for you?
Yeah, I think first off, I think we've known each other since I think at least me was a lot less gray than I am now.
Me too.
I it wasn't long ago. I actually saw a Facebook memory. I remember I was happened to be driving by and came and boosted your vehicle one day at your house.
That's right.
And I looked at him like, man, I looked so young then. It it has been just an incredible journey, I think, here in Prince George. I kind of fresh out of high school had an opportunity. I applied for this. It was a poster that was in the hallway at DP Todd that there was a new summer camp opening in town, and they were looking for camp counselors, and it was a 1 week camp targeting youth who would not financially be able to go to camp any other way.
Right.
And I was like, you know what, like, sure, why not? Like, make a couple $100. What? Go hang out with some kids at the lake for a week, and applied, and was successful. And the program was called the Northern Star Camp for Kids, and they used Camp Elkness out on Ness Lake,
right,
and had an amazing week. And then all of a sudden, it turned into a part-time job where I ran a weekly drop-in program for kids who lived in the Quinson, Spruceland, Lakewood area, actually in the Kinsman building, where I spent many years at Big Brothers. And all of a sudden we were getting 70 kids a night, and I had a team of almost 20 volunteers, and we did everything from play capture the flag to doing water art classes, water paint classes. We taught them how to do line dancing. Like, it was really about what the skills and passion of the volunteers were that always fun to design that program. And we started more summer camps. The program continued to grow, which then one night I was leaving, and happened to run into a staff member at Big Brothers who was like, "Hey, we're hiring a fundraising person. Are you should put in an application?" And I was like, "I don't have to work. What do you mean? I don't have to work 2 jobs and you're gonna pay me $14.50 an hour? Like, yeah, let's go." And started with that Big Brothers 17 years. So I spent 6.5 doing fundraising and marketing, and then 7 as executive director, or nope, 7 is fundraising, 10 as executive director. And it was one of those things where it was just, the longer I was there and getting to see the impacts of what the program was having on the community just kept me motivated, kept me going, and was very fortunate. I left Big Brothers in the beginning of 2023, joined the national leadership team at Scouts Canada, where I've been since. And as I look back, having spent my pretty much entire career in charity, other than a brief 1 year stint in high school doing telephone surveys, I have been very fortunate to be able to work in jobs that give back to community and help provide proactive and educational programming to children and youth. So that's kind of my work journey. I think on the political side, I was actually a volleyball coach at Lakewood Junior,
Right.
and coached volleyball there. And then all of a sudden, the school was slated for closure back in 2010. And I remember going to the public hearings, and somebody pushed me to speak, and I spoke about why, the impact that a junior high has on students who may fall between the cracks.
Right.
And the fact that, those opportunities to succeed and lead in a junior high may not exist at a school as big as PGSS. So I got up, laid my heart out on the table, listened to many other parents lay their, stories and their heart out on the table. And then the decision was made to close. And I remember feeling at that time like, oh my God, they don't even care. They're not listening. 50 people got up and, shared their story, and the decision was already made. So a few months later, I was still bitter about it, and they had a call for nominations for school trustee. And at that point, I was like, really, I think no intention of winning. I just wanted to go and speak about how unfair the school closure process was.
Right. Yeah.
And that if you're going to do consultation, you need to, if you come out with the exact same list you went in with, were you actually listening to what the public had to say? So I ran. I was 24 going on 25. Had, again, no intentions of thinking the community was going to elect me. And then come election night, I won and was shocked. I was probably more nervous once I won than I was through the entire election.
Right.
Because when you're running, you can kind of say what you want. I didn't know any better. I was 24, 25. I just spoke from the heart. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, what did I get myself into? And then I was very fortunate to serve 3 terms on the school board. So from 2011 to 2022. During that time, spent 4 years as board chair. I spent 4 years as vice chair. I spent 5 years on the provincial board of directors for the BC School Trustees Association, and was vice president in 2022, kind of gearing up for to run. If you were to ask me June of 2022, my plan was to run for school trustee again this term. And over the summer, I kind of reflected around why I was running again. And at that point, I was running because I really enjoyed the work I did provincially. And I was like, you know what? That's not a good reason to run for the community. The community deserves new people to help shape education in our community. I still felt I had something to serve and give to our community. And then when I looked around, I noticed that I didn't feel that me and kind of my life situation was representative on council. Being, you know, I have 4 young kids at home. I know the challenges of trying to buy your first home in this climate. I know the challenges of trying to get your kids into swimming lessons. It was I didn't feel that I can't really claim that I'm young anymore, but you know we have younger counselors on council, but I didn't feel that, you know, my generation with young families, with, you know, kind of at that point in your career where you're not really doing entry level. You've worked your way into you have worked your way through your career. You're still at kind of your prime earning area. I felt like the young family, young professional demographic was not represented on council, and ran in 2022.
Do you think that that's changed now? Is there enough representation for that subsection of Prince George's population at this point, or do we need more?
I think there's absolutely room to. I think there's absolutely room for more on council. I think we're in a. I think the whole municipal system does not create great opportunities to add younger diversity on council. And I've said this all through my term is, and I would say diversity in general on council, where, you know, yes, we're very fortunate to receive a stipend for our work on council. So, you know, as a city councilor, I get 41,000 and change pre-tax, which helps offset the work you do as a councilor. But you know, when there are numerous, you know, evening and weekend commitments, you know, I'm very fortunate. I have an amazing wife. I have amazing family in town. But if you're a single parent, or you're not in a position where you can have childcare readily available whenever you need it, that's a disadvantage.
Yeah.
We're also seeing more and more companies tell their employees that they're not supportive of their staff being in elected office. So I saw it with the length of time I was at Big Brothers. I was very thankful for the support of my board to be able to run.
Is that a thing? Corporations not wanting people to be a part of politics? Is that? I guess that makes sense. Business and politics don't mix, so you don't want somebody that's on your board saying things that might, I guess, at the end of the day, hurt your sales or whatever you're doing. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, I saw it. I was contacted by, you know, various headhunters or in opportunities where I applied over the years, where even as a school trustee, there was zero interest in allowing me to do that. Mm-hmm. So a job offer was subject to me resigning as a trustee.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had zero interest in forcing a $80,000 by-election.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it does the community no interest in all of a sudden forcing that kind of money because I made a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. If it was something completely outside of my control, health related, you know, I lost my job and I had to relocate, like that's one thing. But if I'm choosing just to take a career change and now triggering a significant cost to the taxpayers, that's just not something I was okay with.
Right.
So I think you're going to see so sorry, well, I guess where I was going with that is it is becoming harder and harder, I think, for those who aren't in a position where there is some form of um, there's some form of privilege with flexibility in your work, or having the ability to have family care for your kids.
Yeah.
It then creates just barriers for people to run.
Yeah,
And
and I mean, plus it's a cost thing too. Anybody that has a family these days, it's not like you have an extra. I don't even know what the cost is to get in these days, but it's not like you have that extra money just sitting around. Then you got a campaign. Good luck getting time with your kids and your wife and your job and everything like that just to do the campaigning to get that money. So yeah, no, that's totally understandable. It would have to be somebody that's kind of set in that sort of work, kind of like you are. You being a president of so many different organizations, both provincially, civically, and all that type of thing, you kind of have a mind for it. So there's a little less training for you at the end of the day. So you can represent that side, but still have the maybe some of the pre-training done for some of this council
I,
work. So yeah, I can see that
you
hurdle
know,
for sure.
I will say, and one thing in hindsight, I will admit is, when people were to ask me during the campaign, one of the things that I got wrong was I talked about the fact that I had 11 years, almost 12 at the school district. I the school district and the city are fairly similar sized organizations. They're both about a $200 or $200 million budget. The school district has close to 2,000 staff. Um, City's not that big. We're about 800 or 900. Um, you know, I talked about during the campaign, one of the advantages was I didn't think there would be a steep of a learning curve for me. And in hindsight, that is something I completely underestimated. Is
You always do.
while
Yeah.
while while I understood the governance, and I understood the Robert's Rules of Order and the procedure
Process.
of
Yeah.
meetings, it was a steep learning curve, and it probably took me still a year and a half or 2 years to um, get myself comfortable enough with like how the city operated to feel like I could be there. And the expectation is you do it from day one, so you do your best, but there is definitely a learning curve that's attached to it. And I think it's one of those things that we need to, like, in reality, the only thing you need to be a city councilor is you have to be 19 and able to convince the population to vote for you
Mhm.
and not have a criminal record. Um, it's so this is where I think orientation of elected officials also plays a really critical role, because um, once you're elected, you're hitting the ground and going, and you need to be able to make sure that you're setting the next council up for success as best as you can, because the reality is the election is middle of October. By middle of November, the new council's in place at their first meeting, and
Yep.
the work of the city still needs to continue.
That's something that I've brought up. I get in a lot of conversations online with, what's going on with the city politically too. And most people don't really understand what's going on from council to administration and just how the business works, just where things get, where the wheel gets greased and where things get moved along. And one thing I keep telling people, they're like, "Oh, clean house," every time something happens in the city they don't like. And I said, "Don't clean house. The thing is, every time we bring in a new councilor, it's 2 years. It's 2 years before that councilor is fully effective in that role at minimum, because you got to go through 2 seasons to really understand the cycle of the city, how budgets work, how the managers work, how you can communicate with admin. So we can't just be turning over councils like this all the time, because it slows down the production overall of the city and it slows down our own progress. So yes, do we need some new blood in there? For sure. Do we need to clean house? Not at all. So that's part of the thing I want to do here, is try and get some info across to people about how this works, how city managers are tied in to spends and to different budget projects and things, so that people have a little bit more perception into how this entire thing works. So let's get a little bit further into that. Actually, it kind of feels like Prince George is in a little bit of a transformational moment right now. What's your 10,000-foot level view for the next 5 years in Prince George, 3 to 5 years? What should be the focus and the next step to kind of get us out of this? We're adding taxes on a year-over-year basis. How do we get ourselves back in a positive area where we're not doing that?
Yeah, I think I kind of, when you were talking, I think I've always kind of thought that there's really, three approaches that I would take, and have been trying to move as one of 9 voices around the table. One is, you're absolutely right in terms of, I think I was probably one of 50,000 homeowners who were, swearing at myself when I opened my tax bill and, saw, what I owed for taxes this year. The reality is we are operating the city is expensive, and it's not getting any cheaper. I think COVID has caused, in particular in like the areas of, I'll use asphalt for example, and concrete. Those costs are going up right now, upwards of 30%. When we did the math, I did the math at Finance and Audit when the budget came through. At our current spending on sidewalks, it would take us 60 years to replace all of our current sidewalks in Prince George.
Yep.
That doesn't include repairing what may be faulty. I think, I got an email from a citizen recently about the sidewalk condition on Winnipeg, and I went out and looked at it, and I'm like, yeah, like this is not an appropriate level of service that we like to provide. On the flip side, we don't want to raise taxes. Like, I don't think any politician gets into office. If you went back to look at my when I ran, I have not been able to achieve the target that I set in my campaign of trying to get taxes to between 3 and 5%. This last year, I had either proposed or supported cuts that would bring our taxes down to 4.2. I did then support some of the enhancements that came forward, not all, but then we ended up, as everything adds up, we get to this year it was 6.79, I believe. That number, I'm probably wrong on that, but it was over 6.5. And the goal is to ultimately keep taxes as affordable as possible.
I think
challenge with
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the challenge with that is to make sure that we either have to agree as a community that we are okay with reduced service. So we're okay. I brought to the table, let's look at our service level of snow removal. Very unpopular conversation, and heard loud and clear that that was not really interest in things such as not opening driveways, such as not plowing 24 hours on stat holidays if there was a snow event. Heard loud and clear from residents that that there wasn't an interest in reducing the service level of snow.
Yeah.
Or,
I think a lot of people question the efficiencies of that program, through and through. I mean, one thing I know is I got to wonder how viable this contracting out those services is at the level that we do. I know it saves us in equipment maintenance and things like that at the end of the day, and it's going to save us in some staffing costs. But when it comes to everything that we seem to bill out to other corporations in this town, it seems like they love to pad their billing. Everything from those bathrooms all the way across to everything else. I mean, $750,000 for a tiny bathroom over at the ball stadium there is absolutely insane when we all know you can build an entire house for that much. That was obviously padded by the contractors. So I think at the end of the day, people don't want services cut because I think a lot of people question the efficiency of the program itself. And I wonder if we're not getting the full amount of data we need from admin to properly go from top to bottom on that thing and really understand if our money's being spent properly.
No, and I think that's a really fair. I think that's a really fair comment in terms of understanding the balance between what is done by city staff, what is done by contractors. I know there was a conversation at Finance and Audit as well around the retainers that we paid to contractors so that they are available on quick response. We've talked about how do we make sure that we are keeping our snow budget as affordable as we can without decreasing service. I also know my phone lights up on days that it is relatively nice out and you have a plow going down your street and you're questioning why.
Yeah.
And some of that is around making sure that the drain or the
Drainage and stuff. Yeah.
drains are open and that we're not overburdening the drain, the wastewater drain water system. But there's definitely an optics issue, and I think this is also where I think transparency is key, because people have the right to know, right? Ultimately, it's your tax dollars paying for that plow going down the street, and most people are reasonable when you say the plow's coming by to make sure everything's open. Um, they get that, but it's where we need to make sure that we are communicating, and that we're communicating with the information that people need to help understand.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I can help out with that with platforms like this a little bit too. I think we need the data though, some line by lines on how we spent $10 million on snow clearing in a year when we had way less snow than I've seen in my lifetime here in the Prince George area. It would just be nice to see how that's spent. I mean, we totally understand inflation. We understand what the pandemic did. We understand that everything costs more these days, but it's like, show me, show me the numbers, show me how you spent it, and then let's see if it's fair. Let's see if this is something we can fix. And I think when we get to that service level thing, I think that's where people are like, I don't want to cut service levels until you prove that the dollars I'm giving you are being spent properly. Like, let's doge this thing, I think is at least what I'm getting from the reasonable people that I'm chatting with out there anyway. There's a lot of unreasonable people too, and when you land in the middle of it, that's what I feel like.
Yeah, and I can't fault them for that, right? I think that was and anyone who watches council on a regular basis knows that Trudy, Councilor Clausen, and I don't always agree on everything, but I know that she is leading the charge right now on how do we get more data presented to the public. I seconded a motion from Councillor Skaken at one of our last meetings around how do we do a better job bringing to the public expenses from senior levels of management to the council table.
Yeah.
That was a motion Councillor Skaken brought forward and was proud to support.
Yeah.
I think to your point, we also have to make sure that we're just not bombarding the public with 40 different data points to try to tell our story, because I can show you the data on everything till the cows come home, but if in that case I'm just bombarding you with information, you're then not probably getting the full picture on what you want. So I'm not suggesting we pick and choose what we share, but I think we need to make sure that we're sharing the right data.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be data that makes us look good, because there's going to be stories that we tell that you don't look good. Maybe it was the wrong decision. Maybe it was something that could have been done differently. But then the community's expectation is, how do you take that findings and make sure it doesn't happen again?
I mean, I come from a bit of a different angle on that. I think it's media's job to take that data and make sure that they can bring it down to a manageable and focused level for people. So at the end of the day, I'm a data guy. You know, give me all the data. I find that there's this thought process out there that you can't give people too much data because some of them are going to misperceive it. Well, I think if we don't give everybody all the data, everybody is going to misperceive it. You know what I mean? So if the data's all out there, I believe most humans at the end of the day are looking for the truth and are looking for good. And I believe there's a certain amount of people out there that are very good at, focusing that data and making sure that it is true and clear. And then we just need to make sure that we amplify those messages at the end of the day. So I hear what you're saying. I understand that putting data in the hands of stupid people can be very dangerous and can be very volatile.
To be
But
fair, that was your word. But
100% my words. Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah. But I think it's
but
important. You know, I think at the end of the day, it all comes out in the wash when you give it out to the masses. Because yes, you're giving it to the stupid people, but you're giving it to the really smart people too.
no, absolutely. And I think, and the thing is, I think there's some of that data that's already easily accessible, but we probably don't make it as easy for people to find out. And an example I'll give is, so I sit on finance and audit. I've spoken. I think I've already referred to that a couple times. Um, Multiple times a year, we get a multi-page spreadsheet that tracks the the budget, the timelines of every capital project the city's undertaking.
Chris
So we
Dalio is
can,
in charge of that, right? Yeah.
yeah, so we can track. Okay, this is the budget that's been approved by council, or has there been amendments to the budget? Because maybe we got additional grant money, maybe something's come forward to council and we've had to make a decision at the table to adjust the budget. But where are we in terms of the budget? Where are we in terms of the timeline? Is the project going to be done on time? I can tell you that report um, will show you exactly, okay, this project hasn't delivered on time. We're behind. We're trying to understand why, or this is why. You know what? This project may come under over budget, or this, the budget's being reviewed on this project. Um, but it's something that finance and audit goes over twice a year.
Yeah.
But the general public would not necessarily know that report exists unless it is one of the stories that the local media picks up on when they're at a finance and audit meeting, or as part of a consent agenda at a public meeting, or you happen to go into a finance and audit committee agenda to find that spreadsheet that gets presented to the committee.
I think
So
people. Sorry, keep going.
no, I was gonna say, I think that's where now, we as elected officials, we as a community and a city need to do a better job, being able to make sure that people have access and know where to find those types of reports.
Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration out there comes from, a couple of the projects that have been absolute disasters, to be totally honest, here in the Prince George area. One of them being that underground parking, and the amount of information that was, oof. There was a lot of people that knew a lot of things that weren't saying anything at the time. So I think people are having a hard time trusting data these days, even when it is available to them. And that's where I think our media is absolutely failing at the moment in focusing that. That's their job. And it seems like what's happening is people want to make the message smaller, make it more clickbait, make it more headline worthy, rather than, actually getting to the depths of it. So,
I think there's a trust deficit between members of the community and the city.
yeah.
And that trust deficit is not going to go away until they are proven that we can be fully trusted again. And
Do you
I
think
mean,
that there
I
is there a
spoke a little.
communication issue between city council and city admin? Do you think that that is part of this and something that could help with transparency?
I think that there's always an opportunity. I'm always of the mindset that over communication uh, is critical. I think that
Our city admin
um,
was voted the most secretive city admin in all of Canada 2 years ago.
yeah, that is a I think an award that I would hope we never win again. I think this is where it is also the role of council to make sure that um, we're asking the right questions at the table. Where we are making sure that as much business that can be done in a public setting is done in a public setting, um, and that it is. I think that's where ultimately, at the end of the day, council is responsible for the governance of the organization, right? If
Along with the
we're
city manager, who I honestly, it seems like our current city manager is using the same playbook as our last two city managers that we had to pay quite a bit of money to walk away from. And in that, what I'm saying is, we recently had this controversy in council chambers where there was some undercover police officers showing up to city council meetings, and nobody knew about it until it went down. The thing now, I don't want to get into whether or not they should have been there, what it cost. I don't want to get into that at all. My issue that I saw, and an issue that we've seen in the past, was the way it was dealt with by the city manager. There was questions being asked not only by city councilors but by residents as well, and he refused to answer questions. All he did was send out a media release and then just let everything stand on that. With our city manager being our only communication hub inside city admin, I think that he failed in his duties in not answering some questions there, whether he thought that was a ridiculous issue or not. Um, and this is the same playbook that we saw with both Kathleen Soltis and Beth James in the past as well. Um, that's the communication issue I'm kind of leaning towards here, where I'm like, do you think that this is a problem? Am I misperceiving this in your mind, or is this something that is a bit of an issue and could be fixed?
well, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the city manager is the employee of council. So I think it is a job of council when ultimately there is a communication um, issue like the one that arose. I think you spoke about um, the undercover police officers during the most recent OCP public hearing. Um, Ultimately, it is council's job to we are the supervisor and ultimately responsible. The city manager is the one employee of council. So when there is a breakdown in communication that way, it's important that uh, council takes the responsibility of that, and we then have our processes just like any other kind of employment relationship where if there was a concern as to how that's how a situation was dealt with, then that's a conversation that council would need to have, or the mayor would need to have with the city manager, just as if the city manager had concerns with how one of his staff or her staff, depending on who the city manager was at the time, dealt with the situation. And I think that is probably the challenge. um, I think that's probably the challenge that exists. And I know, um, again, I was school board chair during a time where there were numerous um, turnover in superintendent as well,
Mhm.
and there is there's always pressure from the community to understand how a situation was dealt with. I see it. We see it as well. If We get a complaint about maybe it's a bylaw officer, or maybe it's how somebody was dealt with at how somebody was treated at the front desk of the service center. I think about it in my day job where we have somebody doesn't like the way they're spoken to, and they complain, or voice their concerns. We have there are protections through employment standards, through labor law, which also you know don't allow us to have conversations publicly about the employee has protections around how we discuss performance, or how we discuss um, the good and the bad of any employment relationship. And I don't envy city managers or superintendents or um, anyone in those kind of high profile positions where all of a sudden you know every decision that they make could be front page of the paper. Or
Mm-hmm.
um so I guess what I'm trying to say is I can understand the public's desire to have answers as to how every situation was dealt with, to have um to be upset as to how staff at the city may or may not do their jobs.
I don't think
um
it's every
but
situation, but I think if you're if you're going to send out a news release on something, I think you should be. What I say to when I get into conflicts with anybody is I say, okay, you planted a flag. Now what's your data set? I feel like a news release is planting a flag. I feel like the questions asked afterwards are a data set. And if you just plant a flag, that's starting to feel like an authoritarianism move rather than a move of transparency. I think he missed half of it by not answering questions on putting out a news release. I agree. Like, there is so much shit that goes on inside and outside to run a city. I fully understand that, and I will never understand, every avenue that it takes to run a $200 million company that is the city of Prince George. But at the end of the day, um, I think that to be fully transparent, if you're going to send out a message to the public like that in a release, I think you need to answer the questions at the end of the day. Otherwise, it looks like it's a cover up. Even if it's not, I think it looks
no
like
no and
it's a shut up document.
no, and I think that's fair. And again, I think ultimately then that's also where the responsibility comes back to whether it's a mayor or council, who get. And I will say sometimes it's not a lot of advance notice, and there are some times that we see releases um kind of as they are, you know, as they're coming out, or in some cases I may not be on my email and I don't see a release until somebody sends it to me from because they saw it on Facebook.
I've seen those
Um,
releases released 5 minutes before a meeting starts too, which is quite obviously strategic.
right. So, I think it's important then, again, that's where ultimately council is responsible for ensuring that the public has um, when there may be something of a communication miss, or we know that this is of high interest to the public, um, that we do a better job in providing that communication. And again, whether that's through the mayor, whether that's through council.
This platform's available too. I think long form conversation on many of these things is the way to go. So if media won't do
And
it
it
for
just
you guys, then yeah, I will.
Yeah, and I think as I said, like, there is a trust deficit that exists between members of the community and government. I think I would say all levels of government. Um, definitely at the city, and I think um, you spoke to some of those historical things that have contributed to that deficit. Um, I think one of the recent um, a recent example I thought about shortly after I started on council was the roundabout on 18th there, and it left everybody, scratching their head as to why are we putting a roundabout there when there is basically a park. And again, when it initially came in front of council, I kind of had very similar thoughts, and it wasn't until we had a conversation with the developer who also helped contribute to that. But when you have 400 new units going in on a corner there, many of them potentially are UNBC students. They need an ability to go north towards the university.
Right.
And if we didn't have something there, you're either having people do illegal U-turns on a blind corner, which is going to result in somebody dying, or we're not creating we're not creating safe access. And again, it wasn't until we started telling the narrative as to the why that people were like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this is where I think we need to make sure we're communicating well. And I'm not saying that our city communication staff is doing a poor job. I think we have some really brilliant people on our communication staff.
Yeah. Look, man, communication got really, really tough in the last 15 years here. I mean, when I started in radio 20, oh God, I don't even want to say how many years ago, really ages me. Many years ago, we were the number one spot. We were the spot you came for your new music. We were the spot you came for your news, your sports, your scores, your everything. Once social media came along and the internet came along, people were going everywhere for everything. So it's communication is not an easy thing anymore. But I think that there are ways to get past the archaic ways that we're still doing some things. It's just when you got a massive ship, it takes a long time to make that corner. You know what I mean?
And we make sure that we tell the why. And I think to your point, and something that I try really hard to, where on my social media, absolutely I'll respond to every question that that gets through. I've tried to enter into conversations on other channels. The challenge is then I get into a good conversation, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then I don't get back to it, and I feel like I've left them hanging. But I do think that there's opportunities, as you said, in different ways to engage the public to help answer that question as to the why. And I think until that's my commitment through this through our conversation today is how do I make sure that I'm doing a better job telling the why, and encourage my colleagues to tell that, to further enhance the information that's getting out to the public.
Yeah. Because
again, until people understand that all of that information that goes into a decision being made, then people are going to question it, and if they don't feel that their question is properly answered, that trust deficit grows. Mm-hmm. And I mean, one of the things that I talk to my staff all the time about at work is if people don't have information, they make up their own.
That's right.
And that does not help us at all, especially in government. So I think it is critical to try to, as you said, turn the ship. And it takes time, but to, as elected officials, our job is to make sure that we are probably over communicating where we can to start bridging that trust deficit.
That's what I was saying earlier, baby. More data. Give us all that data. Let's dive into a couple things. Let's find out your idea of why from a couple of council decisions that's come down here in the last little while. City spending. $1.25 million for 2 small bathrooms that 90% of our residents are never going to use over at Carrie Jane Gray Park and at the new Smart Start, or what did we call that new basketball court over there?
The jump start.
Thank you, the Jumpstart court. So
Okay.
$1.25 million. The $750,000 one is what really irked me, to be totally honest. And I know we did put that back to tender once, and it came back even more expensive at that time. My question was, like, we put in those beautiful little outhouses at the new Riverside Park on Foothills up there, and I think those cost $60,000 or $70,000 at the end of the day. Why would we not put one of those in for the next 15 years? Probably spend less at the end of the day, even with the clean out fees. And then maybe we get to a point where we're not either A, getting hit by absolutely brutal inflation and tariffs, which we're in the middle of now, or, we find a way to deal with the fact that contractors are obviously padding some of their stats here to get some more dollars in. What was the why from council on spending seven? Let's start on that one, on 750 grand for the bathrooms over at the ballparks there.
Yeah. So I mean, I can speak more to, I think, the Jumpstart one than
Okay, let's go to that one then. Yep.
Just because of the timing of I think original decisions being made, the transition into council. Yeah. So I mean, I think that when we look at the Jumpstart Park, we look at some of our other, I think, premier parks. I mean, I think we got a lot of questions as well around the playground replacement at Clay Lake Memorial Park, which is a very large price tag. I know we questioned it quite a bit at council. I think, you talked a little bit earlier about our contractors, inflating their bids, and again, I think only the contractors can, fully speak to what they're doing when they reply to a tender. I think that we are seeing the trend of bids increasing on projects. It was a concern that I saw even during my time at the school district when we looked at the cost from Duchess to Shasti. That was a $40 million increase in 7 or 8 years.
Is it possible to hold these guys' feet to the fire a little bit? Like, is it possible to say, hey, show us your non-government contracts for buildings of a similar size over the past 3 years? If you were to have data like that, then you could easily tell if this thing was horribly inflated or not, right? Is that a possibility? Is that something you guys can do?
I mean, I think it's something that it's something that staff push back on, or have asked about, because I know it's something council has pushed back on, is why are these costs getting ridiculously high? At the end of the day, they're also private businesses, right? You can't FOI their contracts, you can't so it's going to be harder to be able to do that comparison to comparison.
If they want city bids, couldn't you put in a prerequisite of this is what we need if you want to bid on our projects? Or does that limit us to construction companies at the end of the day, which leaves us with shoddy work, which leads us with nothing? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it could, right? I think, ultimately at the end of the day, the more people you're bidding on your projects, the better pricing you're hopefully going to get on your project. I think, you spoke about the bathroom when, it went out for retender and it came back even higher. I think that, we are seeing this trend, and I think we spoke about it at council, we spoke about it at finance and audit, of this trend of capital projects. The quotes that we're getting back from businesses is incredibly concerning in terms of the cost that it then puts back on taxpayers.
Yeah.
I think you bring up an interesting question around could we not have found a different solution for say the bathrooms at Jumpstart Park. We had a recent conversation at a committee of the whole around Rainbow, for example,
Mhm.
where Rainbow Park currently has two outhouses. There's conversations around, you know, does putting flush toilets at Rainbow, is that something that should get added to the capital plan next year or in future years? Um, and I think I would say the question of putting outhouses at Jumpstart was not a question that myself or anyone at council asked, and I think that is a very fair point in terms of um, what are alternatives we could look at to that. And I think when we're custodians of taxpayer dollars, that is probably a miss that we should have asked. What is that alternative there?
Yeah.
We have an incredibly beautiful facility that is part of that new kind of recreation corridor on Massey that plays a critical role in being able to host large events that drive business to our community.
100%.
I spent the weekend volunteering with BC our Special Olympics, and we had 900 athletes and coaches plus families um, in our community, bringing business, bringing economic benefits to our community, and hopefully we put on a good enough show that they're going to want to come back.
Yep.
So there is also a level of service I think the public wants to see. I think everyone would prefer a flush toilet over an outhouse.
So I can push back on that too.
Think,
Like, I mean, how many big events do we have in that space per year? 1, 2? So, you can put in for the regular public, nice little outhouses and maybe some water, easy enough to put in there for a very cheap amount of money. And then when you do have a big event, they have Atco wash trailers that you can bring in and have set up too. And then for those 2 events, you can have that covered and even get them sponsored at the end of the day for those events too, and not put all of this cost back on the taxpayer. And this is where I land on with these bathrooms. 90% of us are never going to walk into those bad boys. Never going to walk into them.
No, and again, I think that is where, in that case, council, and I'll again, I don't want to, I can't speak on behalf of council. I'll speak on behalf of myself.
100%. Yep.
That was not a question I asked at that point, and I think that's where it is going to be critical, right? As I said, there's only one taxpayer. The cost of everything is increasing. As a young family, right? We know the pressures that we see because of the cost of everything increasing. And this is where I think, it needs to be a differing mindset, I think, of does every meal, to I think speak to what you're saying, does every meal need to be steak when you could have chicken 2 or 3 of those nights?
Exactly. Yeah. It feels a lot, and this goes back to the communication between admin and council too. I mean, I watch those meetings on Mondays quite often. It feels like what admin is doing a lot of times is giving you guys the absolute least amount of options they possibly can. And I've seen you guys ask for more details 3 or 4 times on some of these things, and then they balk on it a lot of times too, and it seems strategic. But maybe there's some ideas we can pitch at them and be like, well, why not this? Go get us details on that type of thing too, with some of these projects, and those ones did feel like a bit of a miss. Another one that I want to dive into a little bit here too, that had me asking a lot of questions when we did it, and now has me asking way more. Nights In. So we go and purchase Nights In there 4 years ago. Something I questioned Mayor Yu on right away. Which his answer to me was, well, if we didn't buy it at the price that we bought it at, it would have gone out to tender, and then it might have gone for more. And I said, right, but it might have gone for less. And why do we want it? What is the plus to the taxpayer on this? His answer was, well, we're getting rent from, I think it was the province or from whoever was running it at the time. He's like, we get rent on a monthly basis. And I said, great, but that is a derelict building already. And now you're putting people in there that, are going to wreck it more. We've seen this over and over again. It's going to get destroyed even more. And now we're on the hook for either repairs or demolition or whatever. What is the plan with Knights Inn? Is there something here I'm not seeing? Is there a business plan here that I don't understand? I mean, we're a land-rich city already. I feel like we should be using that to either sell some off or rent it off to places like Fortis BC or BC Hydro. And here we are buying a derelict hotel and renting it out to people that don't care about it. What am I missing?
Yeah. So when the city purchased the Knights Inn, it was already in operation through
The province.
BC Housing.
Yeah.
So the province, it had already been up and running as supportive housing. It is I would say, and I think you've noticed right now the trend, and I think council has been fairly vocal in some of our concerns around some of the strategy around purchasing old hotels and turning them into transitional housing. I think council was voiced a lot of concerns around North Star.
Yeah.
And as the province replied in the media, they have the ability to rezone it to move forward with it without council's blessing. If we chose not to rezone it, the province has the ability to say we're rezoning it.
Yeah. Which is
when
insane.
we look at the Knights, when we look at the Knights Inn, I think it's part of that bigger strategy as to how do we. And I mean, I think people are going to roll their eyes when we talk about downtown revitalization, because I think that's been a buzz topic for as long as I've lived in town.
Yeah.
But that is a core piece of land in the downtown civic core, and I think part of the strategy there was, we would, when we're looking at the civic core plan and things, that ultimately the residents are going to have to decide if it's something they want to pay for, whether it's a new arena or expansion of the civic center or performing arts or any of these things that we may want to bring into our downtown core. Having the land under our control, I think, was a big portion of that strategy. So the idea of purchasing that land, giving adequate time for Northern Health to finish, or BC Housing, sorry, to finish their operations in that space. There was a lease agreement there, and then the city then has the ability to either, potentially do we resell? Do we work with a developer to bring housing or additional hotels into the downtown core? Do we use that land for a civic facility? It was, I think, part of the how do we make sure that the city does own and control that space in kind of that civic core area. But again, I think that it is, to your, and I will say, like, it is, I've encountered a little bit now in my professional life in the areas of commercial real estate. I know that there were a lot of eyebrows raised around what the what a BC assessment value on that land is versus.
I made some posts. Yeah.
what it went for. And again, I think valid point, but also there's a lot that goes into evaluation of land.
100%. Yeah. And I talked about that in my post too. Yeah.
I look at my.
It just didn't go out to tender. I think that was the thing that I kind of I rolled my eyes at a little bit, like, And that was what Mayor Yu said to me as well. Well, it could have gone for more, and I said, right, but it's a derelict building being run by BC Housing, and in a section that nobody really wants to get into right now. So I think it probably could have gone for less. But if
Yeah,
you really want it, then you got to pay for it. But I guess I had just hoped that there was a set plan for this thing. Like, we have a plan. It's going to make us money, and I get it. It probably floated itself with the rent money coming in from the province, which comes from us anyway, and I think is a disaster and is a total other conversation. But
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
ultimately,
it's a key piece of land right by
BC
City
Housing
Hall.
also, yeah, and I mean, again, BC Housing, if it's paid for by the province, it's still being paid for by taxpayers. So that's, I think, an incredibly valuable point.
Yeah.
Again, I not going out to tender. That would ultimately be a Northern Health BC Housing decision,
Mm-hmm.
because at that point they owned it.
Yeah.
But I think it was, again, it's when we look at some of the concepts that have come out as part of kind of the initial round of consultation on the core services review, that area of land there is, both in terms of the two that were presented by staff, the one that was designed by the mayor, all of those identify that piece of property is, a perfect piece of land for whether it's mixed use development, whether it's additional hotels that, hopefully we will be able to take that investment and see it grow as that land can be used for something different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, while we're talking about low income housing or housing of that sort right now, we can dive into the Lower Patricia Boulevard a little bit here too. 3-day hearing just ended here just last week as the city looks to permanently close that encampment, which has been open for 4 years, 4 years now, something like that, maybe 5 since the pandemic.
No,
I believe
it would have been 4 or
4
5
years
because it was open. It was open and court, like the court injunction was already in place when I took council.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we would have been
It's probably 5 years
2021
then.
probably.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years. Yeah. Okay. So I actually haven't really dove into this quite yet. What was the results from that? Have we heard yet, or are they still waiting for that hearing to finish up?
So at this point, we're waiting for the judge to make his ruling. Again, Lower Patricia has been court protected for many years. The city has been trying to work with BC Housing and the government to find alternative, make sure that there's enough housing, make sure that there's the daytime facilities to meet the requirements of the court order.
Are those ATCO trailers down in that just down from the encampment? Are those up and running now as shelters?
Yeah, so they're up and running. I had an opportunity to tour them a few months back.
How does that work? How does that whole system over there work exactly?
Yeah, so the government has worked with a nonprofit provider to run those facilities. So they are 24-hour facilities. When we visited, at that point, there was like no visitor access. So the residents are offered housing. They have a room, basically a studio type of space in the trailer. So there's a bathroom and bed and kind of desk space for them. Then there's also kind of a central facility where meals are provided. There is residents. There is like a rental agreement in place with the residents, so rules that need to be followed. It's connected, I believe, with their accommodation subsidy that they would get through either disability or social assistance.
Right.
But they are tenants of that space. There's storage set up for things like bikes or other items that they may not have.
Yeah.
And the idea is that they get supports that they need to help get them successful to move on to another form of housing, maybe with a little bit less direct support.
Right.
But that is, this is kind of the first stage of kind of response to those who are living at the encampment, and the provider has also been um, onboarding people into that residence to make sure that it's successful for everybody. So again, they didn't want to open the doors and have fill 40 beds on the first night, because you're now introducing a lot of personalities into a new dynamic. So back then they were onboarding them 3 or 4 a week, and again that was a few months ago.
Right.
And again, I can't, and so we have the supportive housing on down next to the encampment there. You'll see the construction on First Avenue of the new tower, as part of the second phase of the supportive housing and wraparound support project down next to NR Motors there on First, or I guess it's now SMP Motors.
That's right. Yeah.
We have North Star. We also Northern Health, and BC Housing has also purchased the old Direct Art and Fraser Inn on Queensway.
Right.
So those are all projects that BC Housing and the government have built or are in the process of building to help ensure that we do have the housing needs. And once we hit the ability to show that we had that we were confident that we could meet the court order, that's when the injunction was filed.
So if this thing fails with this injunction that you guys have in right now, and you can't clean this thing up, what's the next step? And if it's successful, what's the next step? Where do we go now?
Yeah, I think that is, I can't speak to what the strategy would be either, if it failed or not. That's something that council will have to look at once we hear the justice's ruling.
Yeah.
I think that, I guess, going back to the communication piece of it, I have spent many hours talking to residents of Miller Edition, walking with them last summer through, and seeing, how close some of the fires have gotten to their property, hearing stories, so I know, that is partly what led to the public safety town hall we did, council pushing for kind of quarterly updates to the Miller Edition residents. So I think, regardless of what happens, we need to think about what that communication strategy looks like, because I think everyone from the public is watching this closely.
I heard some pretty crazy stories about that encampment. Some from the firefighters that were there up to 6 times a day some days. One of them was telling me about a guy that lives down there that calls himself the mayor. And I guess he was collecting dollars. And if people didn't pay, he would burn their shit down. And I'm going, this is unbelievable. Like, and you got this area where it's tough for the cops to get in there and do anything. And how do you investigate these claims anyway at the end of the day? And it turns into a garbage pile. And then you have the province. And is it still Ravi Cologne? Is he still the guy running this thing? Is he BC Housing Minister still?
That's the minister, yes.
Yeah. And then you got Ravi Cologne out there who doesn't see any of these things happening and tells us what we need to do from a top level and how we need to do it. The whole thing has been... it's been tough. I feel for the people in the encampment, and I feel for everybody else, for the residents and stuff too. This hasn't been easy on anybody. But hopefully with the moves that have been made, I hope that we can finally close this thing down and put this chapter to bed.
I first off, I can't imagine what it is, and I'm very fortunate that I'm not in a position where I would need to, I would be living on the streets or living at the encampment. Like, I can't imagine what they're going through. I think there's definitely been some failed government policy that's not helping the situation. I've heard horror stories from bylaw, from BC Ambulance, from firefighters. Yeah. Not just about Lower Patricia, but we've had other encampments pop up. I've heard similar stories about there was an encampment that popped up close to CNC that had like property lines drawn where, you know, it was almost like a little city set up. And I think that, again, the community has worked really hard to ensure that there's supports in place, and there are incredible community members who are stepping up to try to offer as much support to our most vulnerable community members as possible. And that is incredibly hard work that they're doing.
Yep.
You know, I think government is not making it any easier.
Yeah.
You know, again, we recently heard a story at the public safety town hall from RCMP where they arrested the same individual three times in a night
Yeah.
for breaking and entering into downtown businesses.
Yep.
And every time they arrested him, they were told by Crown to release. And when you arrest somebody three times in a night, like that shows that there's a flaw in the system.
Yeah. About 3 years ago, I was actually at a local spot as well, and someone came in with some mental health problems, and they pulled me off the back of my stool and stomped on my head. We had camera footage of it and everything, so I thought this is a nice open and closed case. I even had the guy's name, and so I took it to the cops. That cop watched the footage, and he said, there's a couple problems here. He said, number one, you got up and you hit him back, so therefore the Crown's going to say this was a mutual fight. And I said, how is that mutual? I said, he pulled me off my chair when I wasn't looking and stomped on my head. I said, my reaction off the back end of that should have no bearing on the initial action that happened. And he said, I totally agree with you, but he says, we're doing these all the time right now, and that's what they're going to say. And he says, number two, he said, they're not even going to look at this one because nobody was taken to the hospital afterwards. And I was like, oh, so now crimes depend on whether or not we can take them to the hospital. And he says, yeah. He said, if you really want to hear what I have to say about this, he says, we're just undermanned. He said, at the end of the day, if you press charges on this, it'll take me 2 months to do the investigation. He said, and we're just so loaded with all this other lower end crime. He's like, we just can't get to it. And he said, do you still want me to put in charges? And I said, yeah, I do. I never heard from him again. Not a word. And I thought that was an open and shut case. I mean, full camera footage, full angles from all sides, very clear what happened. And you know, I feel bad for the cops too. They're overloaded on this system as well, and it seems like the government just doesn't want to give us the resources to deal with these things. They just want to give resources to make it worse.
Yeah. Well, and that's I think you know we're hearing it from RCMP in terms of the challenge that they're seeing. You know, I can think of an example when I was at Big Brothers. Again, we had to hire private security to come by and make sure because of how often catalytic converter theft or fuel theft.
I remember that. Yeah, you guys were having issues.
Yeah. Security held the individual. We had camera footage, but again, because the individual was not caught with a tool in his hand, they're like, it's not gonna stick. And I feel for and I think our medical system is understaffed. I think and are still burnt out from COVID. I think you know we're and that has a trickle down effect. We're seeing, you know, we talked about it at budget this year. The amount of calls that our fire department are going on, solely in terms of medical response because ambulance services is so understaffed. And you know, I think one of the things I've also talked a lot about at council, and I think, you know, going back to one of the original questions you asked in terms of like what is a vision for downtown or for our community, is I think one of the other things that are contributing to some of these challenges we're seeing downtown is the fact that our downtown basically closes up at 5 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And it's crickets after 8. Yep. Like after you go to Nancy O's for dinner, you're done. Like downtown. And you know, we look at, you know, so I've talked about it a lot. And I've actually I've asked the superintendent and our previous bylaw director this question at budget. Like, what is it? Do we see a decrease on? I'm going to use Alefest for an example. Kiwanis brings down 800 people a night
Yep.
between the two sessions, and then like after you're done at Alefest, you're going to have a drink somewhere else. Like the night's not done.
Yep.
What is the decrease we're seeing in bylaw call out and RCMP call out in downtown on nights we actually have people down there?
Mm-hmm.
I've asked about even like when the Street Kings are selling out.
Did they have a result?
Um, it was very anecdotal at that point, and it's something that I'm going to keep pushing because I think getting getting a vibrant downtown, getting people downtown, getting more eyes on the streets is also going to be a solution in the long term
100%.
to getting this done.
Yep.
And we can't. And I'm not one who's going to go to the bar, but if we don't have bars open and people going, and Wiener King on the corner, we're not going to be able to get ahead of and create a change of culture in downtown.
That's right. Society polices itself to a certain point. You just have to make sure that they're there. If you only have one section of society in any one area, they're going to take it over 100%. So, no, I fully agree with you. We do need some more things downtown, and we need some protections for those businesses that have stayed there and have tried to keep this thing up and running as well. I work in the liquor industry now, and I work with a lot of those places downtown, and some of the stories you hear from those guys from fires at the back of their building to things being stolen off their patios to broken windows from week to week. We got to find a way to not only attract business downtown and fun things downtown that are going to bring a new energy there, but at the same time, I think we got to find a way to protect some of these cities. I did see one thing go out a little while ago where we were putting fines on local businesses for graffiti or something like that. And I was like, that's not the play. We've got a lot of graffiti going on, and am I wrong on that?
No, I think in that case that there was a grant that I think city and downtown was had in place for to assist with graffiti cleanup.
But okay, maybe I was wrong on that. Okay.
If there was something about a fine for graffiti and somebody can share it in the listener comments, and that's something I'll follow up on because that's not something I'd heard.
No.
But that's also not okay if that's.
No, we shouldn't be punishing businesses. We should find a way to help them, but we definitely shouldn't be punishing them for what's happening by vagrancy.
Yeah. And I guess to connect the downtown quickly to, I think again, one of the early questions you asked that I realized I didn't answer was, or I didn't finish answering because I went on a tangent, was around the vision for downtown and how do we address the keep and retain young professionals here in our community. And in order to do that, you need to have things that are you're going to have, having a vibrant downtown, having a place that you can go for happy hour, or the amount of young professionals that I talk to who would actually absolutely be interested in condo space in downtown or mixed use development opportunities. It's one of those things that I'm amazed at when it's, I would say the generation under me, and again, that makes me feel really old, they don't value space the same way I think that we do.
Yeah.
They're perfectly okay in condos. They don't need backyard space. They don't put us in a sixplex.
Yeah, well, I think mixed use is a great idea, especially for downtown. Why can't we have retail space on a bottom side build up and have residential up top? That way you have a constant energy downtown. You're going to have people there after work. They're going to be going for bike rides and walks because they live there too. I think that's one way we can revitalize downtown, but it's going to take a lot of rebuilding of those massive buildings down there, and that takes investment. I think that's always been our problem, is the investment just into doing this thing.
You're absolutely right. I had an opportunity. I sat with a group of students from a planning class at UNBC who, for their final project, had to pitch mixed use developments in the downtown core, and um, they did an incredible job, and they put together the business case, and it shows to it shows, and they pitched it almost like Dragon Den style, like pretending I was an investor.
Yeah.
But it shows that there are opportunities, but part of that is vision. Part of that is we need to make sure that people feel comfortable and safe being in downtown.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to. I do feel at times, as a community, we are our own worst critics, and it's how do we then also make sure we're changing the narrative of Prince George, that we are selling to the world how great Prince George is, to continue to attract people here as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great angle. That's a great 10,000 foot focus, especially for the next 3 to 5 year. We need investment, we need business, and the downtown needs something. I think we got to start with some of those condos. We had the right idea. I think we might have flubbed the execution a little bit here and there, but we're not done yet. So hopefully that core plan brings forward some more ideas like that.
And we have to focus on not urban sprawl, because our community is already large enough, and every time we add to the footprint of the community, that is additional cost to the taxpayer in the long term.
This is something I keep asking too. Now, during this whole underground parking thing that went on, the thing that saved our ass and that nobody seems to be talking about was actually a move that a former mayor and council made, and that was Colin Kinsley and his council when they did that deal with Porteous, BC. Porteous, BC did a land use deal with us where they were paying us rent for 15 years or something like that. And then at the end of that deal, they ended up buying that land at $34 million. If that hadn't come in, our taxes that year would have gone absolutely through the roof. And that was right during the pandemic debacle as well. One thing I've asked a few councilors since that point is, are we pursuing any more land use deals? I mean, we are a land-rich city. Places like Fortis, BC, BC Hydro, all these guys need exactly that. Is there an opportunity for us to do more business to bring money in rather than just raising taxes?
Yeah, so I think those types of opportunities are ones that absolutely we're continuing to pursue. I know the mayor works very hard to, meet with large business, whether it's ones that who have that type of, needing land, needing to invest. So that is something that the mayor is continually trying to pursue. I think there's also opportunities that we have around. Again, I think about where we already have investment in things. So previous councils made the decision around the downtown energy system, right? And how do we bring in businesses? Originally that was only intended to fund kind of civic facilities in the downtown core. We've now been able to bring on some additional business who then are paying to offset the operation costs of that system. So it's how do we think with that entrepreneurial mindset on that? With regards to the Fortis money, a large portion of that Fortis money is still sitting there. Council has early in the term, council passed a motion that those funds could not be used without both community consultation and at the direct vote of council.
Yeah.
So because again, I think there was a worry that those funds are needing to be able to benefit the community. So how do we make sure that they're truly going to benefit the community? So those funds are still sitting there right now, collecting interest, and will be can't be spent without council giving that direction.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I mean, one thing that I don't like to see is when cities get hyper focused on taxes and on how to bring in, how to fill financial gaps with taxes, when there are business opportunities out there. And I think we need to run it as less of a corporation and more as a civic business. And I think in Prince George, we got a lot of opportunity when it comes to land use and things like that, especially with us being right in the middle of the province like this. We're the northern BC capital because of all of our exit points to all the different areas of the province here. So there's got to be some business deals available between us and some of these massive provincial
Well,
corporations.
and I think you're going to see it the more. I mean, both now with the Port of Prince Rupert, the Port of Vancouver.
Yep.
It's why we've had um, projects like the hydrogen refilling station and other those types of projects also pitched to our community, because
Yep.
Alberta is really leading the way in some of that. And um, where that trucks coming from Edmonton need to refuel here before they either hit Rupert or Vancouver. Like we're that halfway point.
We're the straight line.
And
That's right.
So let's take advantage of that as well, right? And I think you're starting to see. I recently did a little bit of a road trip south, and it is always, as you're heading out Highway 6 or Highway 97 south,
Yep.
and seeing the development around Boundary Road.
That's awesome.
That's what we need to see. And I mean, we have a brand new. I say we, like, city's not involved at all, but the community has a brand new CEO at the airport who comes up from Kelowna, and Kelowna is doing some really innovative things at their airport to bring in additional revenue, including the equivalent essentially of winterizing your RV, but with planes.
Oh, cool.
Right? Like just charging people to store their plane for the winter.
Land use deals. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So, I think, and this is where I think, it's going to be key. And I think it's how do we continue to bring new and exciting ideas into our community, and how do we even in our conversation today, how do we make sure that we're thinking about things differently? Because if you continue to do the same things again and again, that's the definition of insanity. And the community has such potential that it's critical for us to make sure that we do everything we can to set us up for success.
100%. Yeah. That's pretty much all the major questions I had. And boy, we took a few little rants on the side there, which is always good in a conversation. That means we're having a good one. I did want to dive into a quick question. Over the last couple of weeks here, I have been putting up posts on Facebook, just seeing if anybody in the community had any questions they wanted to ask you when we had our chat here. We did get one from Christine Rickards Brown. We kind of dove into this a little bit, but I'll let you answer her question in your own words here too. She said, "What are we doing to support the unhoused to find shelter and access the services they need? What measures do we have to indicate if our efforts are effective? What are we doing to move towards safe housing for everyone? Many are housed in substandard ways. For example, motels on the Hart Highway, which were never designed for full-time living, makeshift kitchens, tons of extension cords creating a fire hazard, broken windows, flimsy locks that wouldn't keep anyone out, mice infested, etc." Which hotels in the Hart are we using for housing right now? I didn't know we were using any on the Hart.
So from either this, from the province's land, and again I use a province because the province is ultimately responsible for housing. There aren't any, I think, supportive or transitional type housing on the Hart. I think what Christine's referring to is, as you're driving out the Hart Highway, there are those Rosebud motels, those
Brothers Inn,
they're kind of the historical hotels that have been along the Hart, which are all private owned hotels. And again, when there's an absence of options, people go to where is where is the most affordable for them to have have a roof over their head.
Yeah, I figured that was
And
a
I think
misperception there.
that, yeah, I think that, um, and, and again, I think for the longest time, those were the type of options that would be available to people who could not afford housing, or may have been on the wait list for a long, long time for a BC housing property.
Yeah.
I also think one of the things we talked a lot about is, and I say this not to criticize shelters, because again, shelters are providing a great service to support some of our community's most vulnerable.
Yeah.
But and they absolutely have to have rules in place
100%.
to ensure that chaos doesn't to ensue. But when there are also some barriers in place that are going to prevent people who are in the most need from accessing emergency shelter, it's then what also contributes to the situation.
Yeah.
And again, that could be something as simple as, somebody's fleeing domestic abuse and they have a cat.
Yep.
Not every shelter available would allow them to bring in a pet.
100%. Yep.
And I think that there are more and more options. There are more and more options that are coming out. There are more, and again, I think we're also seeing not just supportive housing or transitional housing coming out. Um, I and again, this actually comes back to the horrible communication. Just up the street from me, they announced and have started to clear for the new housing for adults with developmental disabilities on McGill.
Right.
And that communication came out and basically said, we're building supportive housing. We bought the land. We're breaking ground. And my neighbors were like, what are you doing here? And council didn't find out ahead of time because it was a private deal between the landowner and the province, and it didn't need to be rezoned. Like, we've been very clear that communication was not great, and the intent of the project wasn't done. But it's another facility being built with the purpose of serving a demographic who are currently underserved.
Yeah.
Those adults with developmental disability who, maybe they don't qualify for aim high housing or other housing that's available. What's the solution? They end up living in an undesirable, potentially downtown, potentially at the encampment.
Yeah.
Highly influenced by negative behavior.
You make a lot of interesting points here. It seems so black and white. Like, what are you doing to fix the unhoused? And it's like, well, it's more than just here's a room and let's fix this. You're absolutely right. There's cats. There's people with developmental disabilities. You've got drug addiction. You've got people in different areas of health. So it's not like it's just finding a spot for these people. But it sounds like you guys are finding angles at the end of the day, like Christine says here. To get people out of the tough stuff. She must be. I think you're right. She must be talking about people living in like the little hotels up the Hart Highway, because we don't have any. There's no supportive housing up there, right?
Well, there would be, but probably not in the same way that people, when they hear supportive housing,
it's not like the motels. It's not like the.
It's not like a North Star or.
Right.
But there are supportive housing developments with Aim High, with other nonprofits,
totally.
providers,
yeah,
who have existed in town for 30 years.
And those are outside of city purview. Those are private companies or provincially funded companies that are running that. So
Yeah,
if that's what she is, if that's what you're speaking of, Christine, those are funded outside of city. But when it comes to the
yeah,
city, Tim and I went over quite a few of the different things that are going on. Everything from the Knights Inn to the North Star to the new housing that's being built for these people as well. Yeah, definitely projects going on to get that covered. And then there was a new one that just broke ground here the other day. The old Remax
yeah.
building.
So the old Remax building, I believe it is a project funded through
Carrier Sicani.
Curious County. Yeah, I think it might be funded through Aboriginal Housing or Aboriginal Health.
Might be right. Yeah.
But again, it's from what I understand, it's a supportive housing primarily for youth or young adults kind of graduating out of the foster care system. So
Another gap. Yeah.
again, another gap that exists. I think ultimately, housing is about making sure that we have the um, we have the units available that can meet the needs of the individuals. But again, as we talked about, we also just can't pick up somebody and put them in any situation and hope that they're going to be successful.
Yep.
So this is where we also need to work with Northern Health, with other nonprofit providers um, to make sure that we are creating the supports in place for them to be successful. And um, I think of it. We talked early on about my entire career in nonprofit, and this is where I also say, though, we as a nonprofit sector have to also do a better job. And I say that, thinking about, um, I spent 17 years at Big Brothers Big Sisters. There were 4 charities in that building, and I always questioned, why are we each paying for our own photocopier? Like, I think it's when we have so many little organizations who are all have amazing people behind them trying to create change, are we also sometimes creating a greater challenge within the sector where
100%.
one organization could have the resources to tackle it? And I think, and I'm not saying that to take away from the work that these are doing, but similar to how the city is responsible for, there's only one taxpayer. A lot of charities, there's only one donor, and we have to make sure we're utilizing those resources best as we can.
Yep.
And um, sometimes that also means that we have to be willing to look at things differently.
Yep, 100%. I mean, that is a common problem that I think a lot of people don't understand too. My girlfriend works, in the industry of helping people, um, either homeless or those coming out of jail, getting jobs and things like that afterwards too. And what you find with these organizations is a lot of times they're fighting each other for the exact same funding. And so there's some really underhanded, crappy stuff that goes on just so that they can, get enough funding to keep doing what they're doing when these places should be working together at the end of the day because their goals and their mission statements are exactly the same. But they're all shooting for the same pool of funding, and so at the end of the day, they end up hurting each other more than they do working together, and that's the inefficiencies that would really make some changes and make some positive change. But big thanks to Christine Rickards Brown for reaching out. Cool if Christine reaches out to you if she didn't get the answer she was exactly looking for.
Absolutely. I have many ways you can get hold of me. I'll make sure that all my contact information is on in the show notes, email, phone. I have a page that I've used from 2011 on.
Politician
So
page. Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
my politician page that has many uh, many different stories and positions and election campaigns or the stuff on there. As well, I have a website. It's there's not tons on the website, It's kind of getting through a little bit of a refresh right now, but just timbennett.ca. All my contact information is there as well. But happy if anyone has questions or comments, like reach out, and we'll make sure to get back to anyone who reaches out.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got into. I was going to talk about security cams, but you know what? We got into the real meat and potatoes, so I think we'll let that one go for this chat. We'll save it for our next one. Thanks for taking
some. You can chat.
What's that?
I was gonna say you can chat security cams with the next counselor.
That's right. Yeah, we'll save that one for the next guy or for you on the next round, whatever we got to do. Thanks so much for taking some time with me today, Tim, and diving into things. I really appreciate the open conversation. We all have our perceptions at the end of the day of what's going on. And I think these long form conversations are things that are really going to help people kind of get to the meat and potatoes at the end of the day. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to take some highlight clips from some of the things we talked about here. I think we had some real poignant moments in there. And I'm going to put those out as singular videos as well, because I know there's a lot of people. We're at an hour and 45 minutes here. Holy crap. You're the longest podcast I've ever had there, buddy. I think you're the longest one so far. A lot of people won't listen to something that long or watch something that long, but I think there's some important info in here that a lot of people should know about. So I'm also going to do some clips from my interview with you and with Trudy that we're going to release here over the next little while as well. That'll hopefully bring some people that normally don't get into civic politics kind of into the swing of it here a little bit more anyway. Thanks a ton for joining me. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to put out about City of Prince George or anything else on your mind?
You know what? Just first off, a huge thank you. I can't believe we talked that long. But again, I think these conversations are important. So anytime you need, my time is yours. If you made it this far in the episode, just a huge thank you to the listeners. Again, please reach out. I know that not everyone's going to agree with what I say or my positions on things. I'm always up to be challenged, respectfully. Always up to have a dialogue, and there aren't many things that I'm entrenched in my thinking, so I'm always open to valid arguments and things as well. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate the conversation. We're going to do this again soon for sure.
Sounds great.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.